This idea of self-leadership is the most important thing, right? I think when we're working in companies, we get so caught up in what our leaders think, what our colleagues think, what our family and friends think, but you can't control their actions and reactions.
Good morning and welcome to the latest episode of the new P&L Principles and Leadership in Business podcast series. I'm Paul, I'm host of the new P&L podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Just before I introduce our guest again today, a quick reminder to those who enjoy the podcast. Please like, subscribe, follow us, leave a comment. All of these things help the profile of the podcast immensely, and it's hugely appreciated. So if you've enjoyed this or any of the other episodes of the new P&L, please do take a moment to subscribe and so on. And a little reminder, if you're a brand looking to align yourself with a top 5% global podcast focused on how we use purpose and principles to redesign leadership and culture for the age of AI, we are still on the lookout for sponsors and have a range of sponsorship packages. So please drop me a line and get in touch. All right, so today's guest is Raj Heyer. Raj is a multi-award winning CEO and founder of TinyBox Academy, and she's regularly requested by leading organizations including Dassault Systems, Google Cloud, and Siemens AG to speak on social leadership, business strategy, and the power of influence and diversity. She's also the author of the soon-to-be published Every Voice Matters: Social Leadership for Inclusive Innovation. It's a fantastic new book that I've had the privilege of previewing in advance of our conversation today. Every Voice Matters will be available from early April. So if you like what you hear today and you'd like to order the book, just follow the links in the notes that accompany the podcast. Raj, a very warm welcome to the new P&L. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Lovely. Let's start with a quick introduction to who you are, what you do, and who you do it for.
Oh gosh, I don't know if that's going to be super quick, but I come from a background of 30 years of experience in leadership and project management in business, finance, and technology industries. And this past decade, I've been running my own business, TinyBox Academy, where I'm a keynote speaker, now an author, and deliver executive coaching programs and workshops for like international clients like Google Cloud, Dassault Systems. But I do have to mention, I also run a company, Mayfly Maven, that's focused on women and wealth, the freedom of choice. And that's where Victoria Gibson, my PR lead, and I host an annual summit to share knowledge on real estate trading, Bitcoin as an investment, etc. And part of that is giving voices to people so they can go on stage and speak for the first time. But like the book says, anything that helps people succeed, that's where I'm at.
Wonderful. And the title of your new book is Every Voice Matters, just to bring a synergy into that connection. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, which was wonderful. You opened with the chapter title, Take Me to Your Leader, and that's a phrase that traditionally points, I guess, upwards into a
Mhm.
hierarchy. But in a world where leadership has been fundamentally redefined and redistributed in lots of different ways, who are you taking people to? Why does that matter now more than ever?
Do you know, it was a bit of a play on words, and it was kind of between discussion with Victoria and I, and it's this idea of self leadership is the most important thing, right? I think when we're working in companies, we get so caught up in what our leaders think, what our colleagues think, what our family and friends think, but you can't control their actions and reactions. You can only control yourself, right? Leadership,
Yes.
like business and information shared through technology, is becoming more democratized,
Mhm.
accessible to everyone, right? I think you would agree with that. Anyone can share
Absolutely.
expertise or influence online. And what is leadership if not expertise and influence? And let's face it, I mean, the world's not quite going the direction we might want. So I believe that if we lead from a place of values and responsibility, then we can influence the culture around us. Now leaders won't like this, who like power, but my strongest conviction is that means we should be talking to the person closest to the insight and not the highest in hierarchy. And that's what's
Yes.
shifting, right? Is this
Yeah.
cross collaboration and this? I think it's the network powered ecosystem that we want to bring together.
Mhm.
And yeah, leadership today sits where context, expertise, perspective meet, not at the top of the food chain. And it's a difficult transition, right? When we are used to the usual hierarchy.
So that's a really interesting point because in a lot of the keynotes I do, I talk about that sort of intergenerational knowledge tap and turning on how we bring those 5 generations at scale together. Your point is absolutely spot on in that the leadership needs to start with the expertise rather than the role or the experience necessarily. But in all leadership environments, giving up power, relinquishing power, or sharing power, depending on how you define it, is always in the hands of those who currently have it. How do we create a
Right.
culture that enables leadership both in terms of experience, which is important, but also leadership in terms of expertise, which could be that 21-year-old account executive who comes into an organization and sees things differently?
I mean, that's we know from experience with Media. He actually put millennials in charge of social media about 20 years ago because he realized that you needed the people closest to the social media.
Yes.
And I think leaders who recognize, who are self aware enough, let's say, to recognize that speed, innovation, and better decisions now depend on who knows and not who ranks, are
Mhm.
going to realize that's how you become competitive. That's how you create the products and services. I mean, we have decades of data showing this diverse perspectives when they are enabled to share their voices lead to better results, better problem solving, better decisions, right? One great example is China's anti-financial sesame credit. I don't know if you know this one. It's an affiliate of Alibaba Group, right? And they created an innovative credit scoring system with alternative data points like social media activity and online shopping behavior to assess credit worthiness. This they did by bringing in who you wouldn't expect, data scientists, behavioral psychologists, right? Local market experts. And they have delinquency rates. I think it's like on loans, it's been historically low compared to other banks, 1.5% or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's because they built a solution that actually works for people
Yeah.
rather than from the top down, right? They brought in the people who are the experts. And I think that's I mean, look, it's ego driven, right? I mean, I think the greatest leaders we have and will have are the ones that realize when you share power, you gain power. Like it's not about this
Yes.
top down approach, right? I don't know. I mean, in your experience, I'm sure you've seen this too.
Yeah. And I think, if we think about AI, for example, and the speed, the scale, the size, the complexity of the change, and to your point, if we have a self aware leader and they recognize that they don't have the level of expertise needed to adopt AI sensibly, successfully,
Mhm.
and they want to give that leadership to someone else, the big question I have, and I haven't got an answer, I'd love to get your view on it. How do they ensure that the expertise or the responsibility and leadership they're entrusting to someone who they perceive has the expertise, they know that that expertise is deep rather than built on sound bites when they don't understand the technology themselves. So they're reaching out to someone, they're saying, you're responsible for AI because that person is articulating a perceived expertise. But how does the person who's relinquishing that leadership power really know that that expertise is deep and not sound bites?
I mean, that's where we have to change how we're analyzing people, like, right? So we talk about status. So I think this is a skills over status kind of a question, right?
Yes, exactly.
The idea is that we come from this habit, and I've seen it through banking. I've worked in banking in Canada for a long time, where we promote people who are good at their jobs into people management roles, right? That's already the first mistake we make without training them, without even asking them if they want that disciplinary responsibility or if they care about coaching people or leading people. But you're good at engineering. Let's put you in an engineering management role. How
Yeah.
does that make sense, right? Just because you're the expert and you're brilliant at what you do, removing you from that and putting you in a completely different role is not necessarily the right way to go. And I think AI is a bit like that, where where with no training, sometimes no desire for accountability or leading people, we end up creating these teams and these AI teams where we don't fully understand how those skills work or whether they're actually like I'm trying to think. It's about how skills are applied, shared,
Right.
evolved, not
Right.
just what people know. And I think that AI is one of those difficult subjects. Like you said, there's no easy answer. But unless you know how a person can learn, apply, share, evolve with the tech, rather than with having that deep expertise you talked about, because
Yes.
that's the issue with AI. It's developing so rapidly that just because you knew something last year that worked brilliantly, it's already shifted about 50 times, right?
Absolutely.
So it isn't so much about that deep expertise, in my opinion, but rather about how they're working with it. Real contribution, learning velocity, adaptability, collaboration.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And let's be honest, individuals augment AI. One trend I've seen that I don't love is millions being spent on AI development and like, what is it now? I forget, 140,000 or something. There's a lot of people that have been laid off. And so we're investing in AI, we're divesting in diversity and people programs. Who are we building for?
Yes.
Who's influencing that build, right? And that's where I get a little bit like, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work, right? Because the biggest thing is, how do you translate the insights into outcomes? How do you take the AI and make it useful to people and your products and your services? And that's where you still need the old knowledge. Like, it's not like we can just cut them out of the equation.
No, and I think that's a very valid point, and I think part of the challenge is there's a panic within some
Mm,
organizations that they need to get on top of the AI game, get ahead of the
right.
AI game. As a result, to your exact point, rubbish in, rubbish out. If you don't know where you're starting, you don't know where you're going, and you don't know what the output is. So
Yeah.
that sort of strategy, that overarching strategy, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? What will it affect? Who will it impact on?
Mhm.
Sometimes isn't thought about to the degree that it should be because of the panic to just let's bring something in
Let's be
and
first.
absolutely let's be first or second at worst. So I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right, and even that conversation, that communication within organizations without context. So we can have an all hands meeting where a leader presents how wonderful the AI tool is that's going to radically transform efficiency and productivity, but it's tone deaf to the narrative that outside that room, all everyone hears is AI is coming for your job.
Oh, but I love that you picked an all hands meeting, because every all hands meeting I've ever been in, which traditionally it's all hands on deck, right? That's where it
Yes.
comes from. And then the leader stands at the front for 2 hours and just talks. Where's
Yes.
the all hands in that? Like,
Yeah.
it's not even. So you're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. They talk about how great they are at AI, but everybody around the table has been left out of the conversation. They're not engaged. They don't know what's happening. They don't know how they're involved. They haven't been part of the decision making, right? That's such a shame.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's expand on that a little bit more because
Mhm.
the title of your book and the premise of your book is Every Voice Matters, but we live in a world of almost overwhelming noise online and offline. So what's the difference between a voice that matters and a voice that simply exists
Mhm.
within a conversation? How do we ensure within our organizational culture that we're creating voices that matter rather than voices that just exist?
I mean, there could be an argument for what you consider matters and what you consider doesn't. But there's a reason I have rules of engagement in the book, because one of the first jokes a friend made was, well, my opinion matters. And it was a very, at the time, it was a joke. It was a sexist joke. And I'm like, well, that's not in the rules of engagement, because it's about creating safe spaces and, coming from a place of values. And if that's your value, then we got an issue, right?
Yeah.
So when I say every voice matters, look, there is a lot of noise in the world, right? It's a valid point. We don't want to just be adding to it. We don't want to be amplifying nonsense. Let's put it that way. But why I think it's matters is that we don't want to talk for the sake of talking. We want to amplify our voices when we stand for something, when we care for something. So my argument is always, can we ever have enough voices raised for wage parity? No. Can we ever have enough voices raised to stop poverty? No. Can we ever have enough noise or voices to prevent violence? No.
Mm.
And now it matters more than ever, because we see that the day-to-day bias is being enhanced and amplified in AI. So when I say every voice matters, part of it came from reading Scary Smart by Mo Gaudat, who,
Yes.
you know him. He's fabulous. And I loved that book because it really illustrates that if we are not on the AI, building the data, influencing the data, then we're going to continue to have bias. So even if you think there's too much noise, is your voice there? Is you
Yeah.
because everyone's unique, right? Everyone has a different perspective. So as long as we're creating safe spaces and we're respecting people, then raise your voice, because if you're talking about something that matters, then we need it. We need it. And there's too much anger and hate. We need kind people too, right? We need good voices, nice voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's teach the AI that.
How do we ensure that? Because I entirely agree with your proposition, but if we take wage parity and poverty as two of those examples that you brought forward, we do need more voices, and every one of those voices matters. But every one of those voices also has to be more than just adding to the noise. It has to be a thoughtful contribution to it. And I think out there in the world today, to your point just now, there's a lot of polarization, and there are a lot of voices that are just parroting rather than thinking. I think on both sides, whatever those sides look
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
what do people need to do to ensure they're giving a thoughtful contribution to those conversations rather than just parroting or just contributing to the noise?
I think, yeah. I mean, that's why I wrote Social Leadership. It's about this idea that you. Well, I mean, let's be okay. So I'll take a step back. One of the main concerns I have, and this comes from coaching executives and coaching, my friends or whomever, is that a lot of people don't actually know what they believe in. They don't
Yes.
have a firm grasp of what their values are, what they really want to support, what changes they want to see in the world. They don't like something in their society or their company, but they don't know how to raise their voices to stop that from happening or to influence change. And part of that
Yes.
comes from this value system. I once coached an executive, and she was a global strategy leader in a huge company, can talk about strategy till the cows come home. She is the expert. I asked her one question about herself, and physically, even, she covered her mouth because she
Right.
didn't
Right.
she's taken so much time, and all leaders have, to talk about their expertise and their knowledge and where they sit in the organization, but not about what they believe and why it matters. And I think that's where you get rid of this idea of just more noise. Like, if we think about, as a strong example, the Edelman Trust Barometer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Leadership visibility is now crucial for earning and building trust, right? I mean, I've got the stats in front of me. 60% of employees expect leaders to speak publicly about controversial
Mhm.
social and political issues. If you don't have an opinion on a political or social issue, how can you speak about it?
Yes.
And I often use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals if they don't have an idea. Well, what's something in here that matters to you that you want to
Mm.
raise your voice to? Because it's not just about being online and creating noise. It's also about being on stage and talking to your employees about what you think matters. It's not just about social media and adding to noise. You've got to know what you stand for. And so many people do not. And that part of what I talk about is, look, it's social representation, know your values,
Mhm.
social responsibility, what are you caring about in the world, and then social participation. Where are the people you care about? Go go volunteer in a community if that's what you care about, right? Go go and speak on stage if you care about women and wealth. Go, be on a podcast and talk to Paul
Mhm.
about why
Thank
leadership
you.
needs to change. But, and I get where you're coming from, because I think there is a lot of opinion around what leaders should look like and what that means. And I think the biggest gap we have is that leaders have forgotten that we have shifted so much to transparency.
Yes.
Everything you do is now online. You treat an employee badly, they're on Glassdoor and they're talking about it,
Yes.
right? Your company does something really bad for the environment, it's online. Somebody's going to know about it, right? So I think that's the shift that's really difficult for traditional leaders to get on board with.
It reminds me of the old, I think it was Groucho Marx. I've got principles, but if you don't like those, I've got others. Still
I love
applies,
that
I think,
quote.
today, doesn't it? Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's also an issue, I think, around, we as organizations, we have become very refined and polished in the way we present our values,
Mm.
perhaps not so defined in the way we role model them and live them. And I think that gap is really, really evident to a lot of particularly younger employees today, that we can stand up and talk about our values as an organization. And, we've got an enormous marketing industry, PR, brand and reputation management that has very successfully identified the values of organizations, but living them consistently is a lot harder, isn't it? And I think that's where the gap is often identified by employees, particularly.
Absolutely, I fully agree. I mean, you can say, I forget who said it, but it was like, "You can tell me you're a nice person as much as you want, but the minute that you are not nice, I know who you are." Right? You can
Yes.
say it as much as you like, any of your corporate rules, and they're beautifully, described and illustrated on the websites, etc. But like you say, the employees will tell different, and customers will tell you different, right? Because
Yes.
always we did this study in banking in Canada. The employee engagement directly correlated with customer experience, right? That's just the fact of the matter. So I would say, I mean, safety is a primary issue. I once had a company where they did an employee 360 feedback on leadership, and not one employee trusted that their feedback would be anonymous, as they said, because they'd
Right.
already seen repercussions the previous year. So
Yes.
now you can go ahead and say, we got 5 out of 5. All leaders are fantastic. But is it true, Jay? data?
Yes.
Is that really what it is? And, so I think it's cliche, but trust is table stakes. Trust is gained through transparency. And I don't mean sharing personal life because I think, we've seen online that that can go quite extreme. It's more about trusting employees with the vision, the challenges, enabling space for them to challenge, fail, and learn. And I have a great example. I worked for TD Bank in Canada, and Ed
Mhm.
Clark used to be the CEO of the bank. I've never met Ed Clark, but I knew exactly what he cared about. He had a rule. Does this serve the customer? That was the one question you had to ask
Mhm.
anytime you did anything in your role. Does this serve the customer? Of course, there's regulatory things that you have to do, and there's reporting that you have to do. But if you are wasting time on something that the customer will not feel, will not see, will not care about, then you don't do it. Right. And this,
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that. That's one statement. But I know it came from Ed Clark because it came down the ladder. Right. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I just think that's a really, really great example because I think a lot of employees struggle with, let's say, integrity, creativity, performance as three values, just plucking them out of the sky.
Mhm.
What does that look like at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning? To
Right.
someone in front of their laptop. What does
Mhm.
integrity mean? They're they're both important and purposeful and vacuous all at the same time because there's no practical link to what they're doing day to day. Now, what
That's
does this
it.
mean for the customer? I think is a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. And not every company is a customer facing one. So it doesn't work for everybody. But the fact is that, and when I say, you should be transparent, that's why I say Ed Clark is a great example because when we had the financial crisis, I was actually working in real estate secured lending when we had that crisis in 2008. So I saw it firsthand. We were getting calls from family and friends, what's
Yes.
happening. Ed Clark did something that I don't believe any other CEO did. He sent a company wide email after sleeping on it, because he always said he sleeps on everything. And it said basically, we're catching up with what's happening as well. We will inform you daily, even if there's nothing to share, we will be available for your questions. But for now, I want to assure everybody nobody's getting laid off, nothing is happening, you are okay. Right. And that's it. That was literally the whole scope of the email. And then every day he made it a mandate that the leaders, the vice presidents and the directors would come down to every floor, host a meeting, and answer any questions. And if they didn't know, they just said, I don't know. But they made it so secure and safe for everybody in the organization because we felt we had a direct line to the leaders, right? So we
Mhm.
could ask our difficult questions. And I think that's really important. In the same company, I had a great leader, Daniele Farinaccia and Josie Consiglio. I always use them because they were fantastic. They had a stand-up meeting every Monday, and unlike other stand-up meetings that I've been at, they didn't say a word. They allowed everybody to talk about the one problem they're facing and then have everybody in the room solution it. And
Yes.
we saved millions on technology in just one of these meetings. Like, because we saw
Yeah.
synergies and we saw that we could cross collaborate on it. And it was like the first time I'd ever seen that play out. And I always hold it up as an example of fantastic leadership. That
I,
social leadership.
I think that email that was sent around was a real masterclass of vulnerability, honesty, and confidence, wasn't it? All in that, you know, single couple of sentences, whatever it was. Obviously, you've paraphrased,
Yeah, I definitely I don't remember. It was ages ago.
but it's a great example of being honest, of demonstrating the vulnerability that we're trying to figure this out as well, but we will always do the best for you and keep you updated. I think it's a really great masterclass in that sort of virtuous circle, I guess, of customer communication.
It builds trust.
Yeah.
I will say this again and again and again. Transparency builds trust. And it's not about talking about your personal life. It's about sharing what are the problems? What are we facing today? What does that look like? How can you help? Who do we need in the room? I have a great colleague or a friend, Natalie Fabra, who moved from commercial finance to future of work, which is a big jump. Like she's been a strong leader. And she says the same. She's like, we have every resource we need. So whenever somebody says to me, I don't know what this is, can I go to, she'll say, go talk to that person. It's
Mm.
the other division that knows that. And that's that ecosystem that we don't leverage enough because traditional companies operate in these silos, right? If you don't have the expertise, you hire
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah. One of the many sections of the book that I really enjoyed was around write the story before it writes you, because it's something that we really focus on a lot on the new P&L. I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and there's a lot of, in Maori culture, there's a lot of what they call whakapapa, which is respect for the heritage, and how you, when your turn in the sun, as the saying goes, you leave that tribe in a better place and you found it. You
Mm.
write the next chapter of the story for that tribe. And it's a really important part of my thinking in business as well. So it's a compelling argument. What happens to leaders and to organizations when they allow others or circumstances to write the story for them when they're not in control of that story?
Do you know what? In this day and age, with the kind of transparency we have and the constant communications, I don't think you really have a choice but to own that story, right? Because
Yeah.
somebody else is reacting and they're saying what they want to say. I always use this great example. It's a bad one for Siemens, but I love it because it's the funniest one. Is this I'm going to say his name wrong, Lo Young Hao. He was a Chinese influencer who they
Right.
do you know it? Do you know this
No,
example?
I don't
But
know.
he underestimated his influence in Beijing, and they used to have, like, oh, what was it? Like microwaves and refrigerators, so they used to do home appliances.
Right.
And he did a video of a small refrigerator where he would swing the door, but it wouldn't catch. They had made the magnet too weak. And
Right.
he went to them and he said, "Look, there's an issue with the product, can you help?" They didn't reply. Then he found out that thousands were who had bought this product had this issue, so then he started representing them. They still didn't reply. I think that they came back on the third shot and they said, "We have a third party looking into this for you." Not even an apology, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he took 3 microwaves outside Siemens and smashed them and recorded it on video.
Wow.
Talk about not owning that narrative. Like, they could it's such an opportunity. Like, again, Ed Clark used to say, every single, customer who's upset, that's an opportunity to exceed expectations, right?
Yes.
They
Yeah.
could have just said, "We're sorry, we're flagging this. Thanks so much for bringing it to our attention." They could have taken care of that, right? But they didn't. And the fact is, this is happening all the time. HSBC had ATMs go down in England. First thing they did was went on X, previously Twitter, and said, "So sorry, we're working on this. It's our mistake, blah, blah, blah." Instantly, customers were like, "Oh, I mean, it sucks, but it's there, it's
Mhm.
happening. Thanks so much." And the CEO went on and apologized, right? So that's what you're talking about, is this integrity of
Yes.
owning that story and that narrative. Otherwise, it will own you because everyone else is talking about it.
Do you think we've wrapped ourselves up in complication these days? Because a lot of what we've talked about today
Yeah.
are the basic principles of human engagement, aren't they? That your parents or my parents would have talked
Yeah.
about. Treat the person down the road at the shop with respect. If something's wrong, it's not what's wrong, it's the way you fix it. And all of those basic things that
Basic
grandmothers
principles.
and grandfathers used to say, but we've
Mhm.
kind of wrapped ourselves up in corporate speak. But so much of what we still need to be doing, particularly in a world where so
Mm.
much technology is engaged in contact with a customer or employees or whatever, it's still those basic human fundamentals, characteristics, values that need to come through more than ever.
Treating humans like humans, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I always say that the younger generations, and I say this as it would benefit them immensely, is this, opportunity to work in customer experience, whether it's in
Yes.
restaurants or retail, because nothing changes your perspective. I ran on McDonald's restaurants at 17.
Right.
Nothing changes your perspective about
Yeah, I
serving
can
a customer
imagine.
than working
Yeah.
at McDonald's and running that, a lunch rush. That's still
Yes.
a lunch
Yeah,
rush.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like, so I've worked in retail, I've worked in restaurants. I know, like, so I've learned that foundation and I love customer experience because that's exactly, and it's the one thing that upsets me the most when I call a software company and there's an issue or a telephone.
Yes.
It's like, why are you talking to me like this? And why am I not able to get out of this AI loop for the messaging? Because it's not answering the question I need answered, right? And the ones that I stick with are the ones that actually respond. Revolut Bank is a great example of that. They have specific people in their help desk who reply immediately to whatever the issue is. I've
Mm.
had things solved in 5 minutes that I needed solved on the bank. And I'm like, okay, I'll stick with you from now on, right? We
Yes.
vote
Yeah.
with our money. We vote with our money, right? So I do think you're right. It is human principles. And that's what I say in the rules of engagement. These are just how to be good human being. And
Yeah.
we don't all get it right all the time. Like, when
Of
I'm
course.
tired, I'm not the best, right? The respect and kindness are really underrated. Really underrated. And what are we building in companies if not for humans? Then
True.
I'm out.
Very true. So when I relaunched the podcast a couple of episodes ago, the focus for this year, as I've mentioned to you before, was
Mhm.
a real focus on positivity and hope to sort of cut out some of the negativity and noise that exists out there at the moment. and seems to be building right as we speak. When we think about social leadership, when we think about the importance of every voice mattering and meaning something within an organization, what gives you positivity and hope with the clients you have, with the people you
Mhm.
spoke to for your book, with the others in your social network from a professional perspective? What gives you hope that more voices do matter, that they are being heard, that social leadership is the
Mhm.
prevailing or the developing leadership characteristic or model or framework? What gives you hope right now?
I mean, that there are some leaders who are speaking up and out against some of the bad things that are happening and trying to represent by example what is possible. I mean, this is a few years old now, but I absolutely use Dan Price as an example because he cut his salary to pay equal wages to his employees. And the results from it were incredible, right? I mean, people were out of debt. They owned their own homes. They had kids because they had financial security. There was so much that happened around that. But he also, and I think this is the important part, he called out other leaders who were paying themselves millions while laying off thousands, right? And I think that's where I get hope that there are people willing to fight, no matter what it costs them, for the right thing. And I see that in some of the leaders that I speak to. I mean, I mentioned Natalie earlier. She moved from this very finance, data driven backing, like that's what she believed in. And then she moved to future work and learned agility, learned that people learn differently, that they need different kind of leadership for them to engage, that
Yes.
we no longer need the earliest in at work and the latest to leave dynamic. And that's one of those things that I get upset about is this concept that we need everybody to go back to the office. Like we haven't learned a thing from pandemic. There was a company, I forget the name of it, where they were really early on this, but it was like 20 years ago. They said, "We're going to change our incentives so that you are incentivized on your output,
Hmm.
not on your hours worked. And we don't care where you work." And they were well before, the common
Yes.
like nomad existence. And so one of their employees always got the job done, but was able to go surfing every morning because he'd always book his meetings at 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock. And that worked for him, right? And he was like, "This is great. I enjoy my life and I get the results, right? So no problem." We seem to have gone a bit backwards on that, but I think with with some of the leaders I talk to, they recognize that. They're trying to change it. They're trying to do things differently. It's slow. As you know, big organizations are like
Yes.
tensors. You can't shift them fast enough. But the more startups we have, the more scale-ups we have, the more that are purpose-led as well. Like we've got lots happening around
Hmm.
sustainability, a lot around social responsibility. That's hopeful. And with that democratization, the fact that anybody can start a business and lead from a purpose, that's really special. I think that's what's shifted us and that's what's changing. And the more the bigger organizations can get that, the faster they'll be able to move as well in the right direction. Yeah.
I think the working from home versus the office is a really interesting dynamic because
Yeah.
I often feel that there's lots of value to people working independently, working from home. And, I surf. So the
Mm.
example you gave is a wonderful example from my perspective, although I'm in charge of myself. So I only got myself to blame. But I also think there is a value to the creativity, the collaboration that exists from the non-verbal clues that you get when you're in the office with someone that you can develop a
Mhm.
relationship in a very different way. So
Yeah.
because we always seem to speak in extremes today, I think there's a halfway
Yeah.
house somewhere there.
Yeah,
I know
sure.
from when I used to work in an office, those incidental and accidental conversations that you hear behind you that filter into what you're doing, we lose when we work only remotely. I think there must
I
be.
absolutely agree with you, but I think
Yeah,
we can change the way that we bring people together. I'll
absolutely.
give you one example. Like, there was this, when Google did their open offices and everyone was like, "We want to be like Google, so we'll do open offices." Of course, they did it on a foundation that was not the same as Google. They hadn't built the
Yes.
clusters, they hadn't built the culture around it. But it was my worst nightmare because traditionally, no, I'm an introvert by nature. That was my worst nightmare that we have an open office, right? For extroverts, it's fantastic because they like the conversation. It helps them be
Yes.
creative.
Yeah.
Whereas introverts want to know what the goal is and then they dig deep. And I think this brings us back to the same issue that we always have. We lead as though everybody's one person, the same
Right.
kind of person. And I think what you've identified, and rightly so, there is something to meeting in person. I would absolutely agree with you. You can read people better, you
Yeah.
understand them better, you get a sense of trust better. But forcing people back to a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday is not the way to do
I
that.
agree.
One of the best things we ever did at TD was we went and did Habitat for Humanity. It was actually in the middle of the crisis, but they wanted us to stick to our commitments. So they said, doesn't matter what else is happening, go and build that house, right?
Mhm.
Fantastic. Already integrity and credibility in that, right? But we were closer as a team doing that, and everything we did after that was far more cohesive as a team than being in the office 9 to 5, Monday through Friday,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So it really matters what you're doing to build those connections. And I don't mean like you have to have a conference every time and put on big flashy stuff. Are you volunteering together? Are you having one meeting a week in person so that you can feel connected? And then you go away and you do your work. Or for the extroverts, do they have the opportunity to, you know, engage more or be at the office more? Right? Let the people who want to work independently, and then give a space. I think there is a balance there. I fully agree with you. I think there is a balance there, but we're so stuck on leading people the same way, no matter who they are.
I
And that
totally
also
agree.
comes to values and the way we work.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Just
way we work is the biggest one that's ignored, by the way. Professional preferences is one of my biggest things. Like, why have you not analyzed how people want to work so you can get the best out of them?
Well, it just comes back to that more thoughtful approach, doesn't it? Rather than,
Yeah.
as you say, the broad brush. Um, just a final question.
Mhm.
For those who are listening today, middle management, senior leaders, whoever they happen to be, employees, when we think about social leadership and the characteristics that are needed to lead us into this next decade, what is the one piece of advice you would offer our listeners today in terms of what they could go away and do on Monday in a very small way to start
Mhm.
their journey towards adopting a social leadership framework more with more commitment and more intention into their, so they're not going to change tomorrow, but what could they
Yeah.
start in that process?
Um, okay, let's see. I think it's the ecosystem approach. You can't change it all at once, but you can start to learn how people operate, what the signals are that you're tapping into, what the collective intelligence looks like. If you understand people, if you understand yourself first, actually, that's the first step. Understand yourself, understand your preferences and what you believe in, and then it's much easier to help lead
Yes.
others,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's step one is really understand what you care about so you can put your voice behind that. And I honestly believe not all leaders are putting their voice behind what they believe in. Internally in the company, they speak up, but not externally. And I think employees are looking for that. I mean, I think there's a great statistic on how much talent is looking to leaders on LinkedIn before applying at a company.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that already is one of the things I push for is, yeah, I mean, I don't always love social media, but LinkedIn is our professional networking tool. It's how you and I met. So why are you not there as a global leader talking about the challenges and what you care about so that employees, potential employees can see what you care about and
Mhm.
engage with that and you can create that cohesion. You know what I mean?
I do. I do.
So I think it's about this understanding yourself, speak up about what you care about. That's step one. Step two is understand your team and what they care about, and then help them, whether it's working for you or working for your colleague across the organization, find what they care about and then help them do it. It could be just volunteering for one of your initiatives at work. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be specifically a role move, right? And I think that this is the magic is replacing this all-powerful executive concept to a values-aligned network that spans stakeholders with authenticity and transparency and trust and all the operating principles that we need. But you have to start with the values. I really do believe that. You don't lead people, you lead signals. Like it's about tapping into this collective
Agreed.
intelligence and moving faster, innovating better. And honestly, I think employees would share their ideas and be
Yes.
more creative and help with the problem solving if they felt they were heard,
I
if they
agree.
felt
I
like their
agree.
voices were okay, and that they could make mistakes because we're very great at the success culture, but we're not so good at the you can fail. And if AI is
Yes.
for anything, you have to be able to fail to be able to
Absolutely agree.
learn,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I think that's the big message is start with yourself because you got to see where your gaps are, where your weaknesses are so that you can then help others attain their happiness and success.
I think it's a great piece of advice to end on, Raj. If people want to order the book, they want to find you. Where do they find you? Where do they order your great book?
That's very kind. I already want to edit it again, Paul. This is the problem. I got the printed copy and then I wanted to edit it. No, I'm on Raj Heyer always, RajHayer. You can find me on LinkedIn, on rajheyer.coach on Instagram. Happy to, always have a conversation about what can I do as a leader, what does social leadership mean? And the book is out April 16th. So I'll be posting about
Wonderful.
it on LinkedIn. So follow there and then we'll hopefully have a chat.
Lovely. And we'll
Excellent.
include all the links and the notes that accompany the podcast
Thank
as well.
you.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Raj. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Paul. Always inspiring to have these kind of conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you once again for listening to our conversation with Raj today. As I mentioned in the intro, please do take a moment to rate us or review us. It all helps with our ratings and our rankings. Please do also take a moment to check out the links and the notes that accompany the podcast, where you can order Raj's book, subscribe to the podcast, and find out more about the new P&L and our mission to drive more principled leadership and more purpose-led business. So finally, I'm Paul, host of the new P&L. Thank you once again for listening. Have a great day and speak again soon.